The council chamber floated in the void between stars, a massive structure built from materials that shimmered with colors no human eye had ever seen. Inside, representatives from 18 different species sat in their designated areas, breathing their own atmosphere behind invisible force fields. The emergency session had been called exactly 47 minutes ago, and the tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Taman stood before the assembly, his blue skin slightly darker than usual due to stress. As the representative from the Lorian Commonwealth, he had seen many crises in his 2 centuries of service, but this one felt different. The holographic display behind him showed a small, primitive probe tumbling through space, its metal hull covered in languages that looked childishly simple compared to galactic standard scripts. This probe entered the contested zone 3 days ago, Taman explained to the gathered council members. Our analysis shows it came from a planet the inhabitants call Earth. They are a young species. It's barely 8 years into faster-than-light capability. They have no idea what danger they have stumbled into. A representative from the insectoid Vrax collective clicked its mandibles in what translated as concern. Have they been catalogued? Do we have diplomatic protocols established? Taman gestured to another display that showed Earth itself, blue and green worlds spinning peacefully in its small corner of the galaxy. Limited contact has been made by independent traders. They are mammals, bipedal, aggressive by nature but not intentionally hostile. Their technology is crude but functional. They call themselves humans. The chamber filled with the various sounds of alien discussion. Some species had never heard of Earth before. Others had encountered human trading vessels in neutral ports and found them odd but harmless. None of them understood why this warranted an emergency session until Taman changed the display to show the current galactic situation. Red zones spread across the star map like a disease. On one side, the territories of the Galactic Council, 18 species who had banded together for mutual protection and prosperity. On the other side, the Velcran Empire, a militaristic civilization that had been expanding aggressively for the past 500 years. Between them lay a buffer zone of empty space, carefully maintained by both sides as a neutral area, where neither would venture, except Earth's probe had gone straight through it. The Velcrons detected this probe the same time we did, Taman continued. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too many wars. They will interpret this as either a council scouting mission or an attempt by a new species to claim neutral territory. Either interpretation will give them justification to respond with force. An elderly representative from the Paxian Collective, a species that resembled floating jellyfish, pulsed with concern. We have maintained this stalemate for 3 centuries, precisely to avoid open conflict. If the Velcrans believe we are making aggressive moves, they will retaliate. Billions could die in the resulting war, which is why we must warn these humans immediately, Taman said firmly. They need to withdraw from the contested zone and remain in their home system until this situation with the Velcrans is resolved. And when will that be? Another council member asked. We have been in this Cold War for 300 years already. Taman had no answer for that. The truth was that neither the council nor the Velcrons wanted open war, but neither was willing to back down from their positions. The stalemate had become comfortable in its own terrible way. Ships from both sides occasionally tested boundaries, weapons were developed and displayed, and threatening messages were exchanged regularly. But actual fighting had been minimal for decades. The council voted unanimously to send Taman as their emissary to Earth. He was known for his diplomatic skills and his ability to communicate complex situations to less advanced species. Within hours, his ship was traveling through council space toward the coordinates the human probe had come from. Earth's orbital station was smaller than Taman expected. It looked functional but utilitarian, with none of the artistic flourishes that most species added to their space architecture. Several warships orbited nearby, their designs angular and aggressive-looking. Taman requested permission to dock, and to his surprise, it was granted immediately. The human who met him in the docking bay was tall by galactic standards. With dark hair pulled back in a practical style, she wore a military uniform that was predominantly dark blue with silver insignia. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent, studying Teeman the same way he was studying her. "I am Commander Hyjin of the Earth Defense Force," she said in passable galactic standard, though her accent was thick. "Welcome to Orbital Station Prime. Your message said this was urgent." Teeman bowed in the Lorian manner, a gesture of respect that most species understood. "Thank you for receiving me on such short notice, Commander. I am Teeman, representative of the Lorian Commonwealth and the Galactic Council. I have come to deliver a warning that concerns the survival of your species." Hyjin's expression did not change, but Teeman noticed her posture shift slightly. Humans were easier to read than many species because their emotions showed clearly on their faces. Right now, Hyjin looked concerned, but not afraid. That was a good sign. They moved to a conference room that had clearly been hastily prepared for his visit. A jug of water sat on the table along with some local fruits. Teeman appreciated the gesture, even though he could not consume human food. Once they were seated, he activated a portable holographic projector and showed Hyjin the same star map he had presented to the Council. "Your probe entered this area." He pointed to the buffer zone between red territories. "This is contested space between the Galactic Council and the Velcrin Empire. For 300 years, we have maintained a careful balance of power to prevent a war that would devastate entire sectors of the galaxy." Hyjin leaned forward, studying the map carefully. Her fingers traced the boundaries, and Teeman could see her military mind working through the implications. "You were telling me that we accidentally flew into a war zone?" "Not just a war zone, Commander. A potential war zone. The war has not started yet, because both sides have been very careful not to give the other justification for attack. But your probe and any other human vessels that enter this region could be the spark that ignites centuries of conflict."
Ow.
"What do the Velcrins want?" Hyjin asked directly. Teeman appreciated her directness. Many species would have spent hours on diplomatic niceties first. They want to expand their empire. The Council stands in their way. "We want peace, but we cannot show weakness or they will interpret it as an opportunity to attack." "So, you have been in a staring contest for 300 years, Hyjin said." And Teeman was not entirely sure what a staring contest was. But he understood her meaning. Essentially, yes. "And we need your species to stay out of it. For your own safety." He pulled up additional data showing Velcrin warships, massive vessels bristling with weapons. The Velcrins do not negotiate with species they consider inferior. They will destroy any human ships they encounter in the contested zone without warning or mercy. Hyjin was quiet for a long moment, studying the information. Finally, she looked up at Teeman. "I will relay this information to Earth's government and military command. Thank you for taking the time to warn us." Teeman felt relief wash over him. He had been worried the humans might react with anger or disbelief. But Hyjin seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. "I cannot stress enough how important it is that your species withdraws from this region immediately. Even one ship could trigger a war." "Understand," Hyjin said, standing and offering her hand in the human gesture of agreement. Teeman took it carefully, noting the firmness of her grip. "We will be careful." As Teeman's ship departed from Earth's orbital station, he felt satisfied that he had completed his mission successfully. The humans seemed reasonable, and once their government understood the situation, they would surely pull back to their home system. It was a small species on the edge of known space. They would not risk annihilation over curiosity. He filed his report with the Council that evening. Earth had been warned. The crisis was averted. The stalemate could continue, as it always had. Teeman had no way of knowing how wrong he was. 3 weeks after Teeman's visit to Earth, the Galactic Council received intelligence that made every representative in the chamber forget how to breathe in their respective atmospheres. The report came from a Council monitoring station positioned near the edge of the neutral zone, and the officer who delivered it looked like he had seen something that violated the laws of physics. 30 human warships have entered the contested zone, the officer reported, his voice shaking slightly. They are moving in formation toward the center of the buffer area between Council and Velcrin space. The Council chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted in 18 different languages while their translators struggled to keep up. Teeman felt his blood run cold as he stared at the tactical display, showing the human fleet's position. Each ship was smaller than a standard Council frigate. but they were moving with purpose and coordination that suggested military training. This is madness. The Paxian collective representative pulsed in agitation. Did they not understand the warning? Do they have a death wish? Recall our previous assessment, another council member said. We classified humans as aggressive, but not suicidal. This behavior does not match the profile. Temin stood slowly, his mind racing through the conversation he had with Commander Haijin 3 weeks ago. She had seemed to understand the situation perfectly. She had promised to relay the warning to her government. What had gone wrong? We need to contact Earth immediately, Temin said firmly. There must be an explanation. Perhaps these ships are acting without authorization from their government. The Council agreed and sent a priority communication to Earth's government. The response came back within an hour, and it was not what anyone expected. Earth was sending an ambassador to address the Council directly. His name was Dayon, and he would arrive within 2 days. Those 2 days felt like 2 years. The Council watched nervously as the human fleet continued its advance into the neutral zone. Velcrin forces were mobilizing along their border. And everyone in the galaxy with access to long-range sensors knew that something significant was about to happen. Independent traders fled the region. Pirates who usually operated in the buffer zone scattered to safer territories. Even the normally bold Vrex collective pulled back their scouting vessels. When Ambassador Dayon finally arrived, Temin was shocked by how young the human looked. Most species sent their eldest and most experienced diplomats to important meetings, but Dayon appeared to be barely into middle age by human standards. He was shorter than Commander Haijin, with a calm demeanor that seemed completely inappropriate given the crisis his species had created. The Council convened in full session to receive him. Dayon stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by representatives from species that had been navigating galactic politics since before humans had discovered fire. If he was intimidated, his face showed no sign of it. Ambassador Dayon Temin began, trying to keep his voice level despite his growing anger. 3 weeks ago, I personally visited your orbital station and explained to Commander Haijin why it was critical that human vessels avoid the contested zone. She assured me that the warning would be relayed to your government, and yet we now have 30 warships in the exact area I told you was most dangerous. Please explain. Dayon clasped his hands behind his back in a military stance. The warning was indeed relayed to our government, Representative Temin. We reviewed the information carefully and discussed it at the highest levels of Earth's leadership. Then why did you send warships into the contested zone? The Vrax representative clicked angrily, because we decided that the contested zone is not actually contested, Dayon said simply. The chamber fell silent. For a moment, no one seemed to understand what the human had just said. Then the implications began to sink in, and the silence turned into stunned disbelief. Explain yourself, Temin demanded. Dayon gestured to the tactical display, and the Council system surprisingly accepted his authorization to manipulate the images. He pulled up 300 years of military data from both the Council and the Velcrin Empire. Ship movements, border skirmishes, threatening communications, weapons buildups, all of it laid out in neat chronological order. You told me that you have been maintaining a careful balance of power to prevent a war, Dayon said, highlighting various incidents on the display, but from our analysis, you are not on the brink of war. You are in a stalemate. Neither side wants to fight because neither side is confident they would win. The Velcrins have superior numbers but inferior coordination. The Council has better technology but lacks unified military command due to your coalition structure. That is classified military intelligence, a Council member objected. How did you obtain that analysis? We observed, Dayon said with a slight smile. Humans are very good at observing military situations. We have been doing it to each other for thousands of years. Temin felt a headache forming between his eyes. Even if your analysis is correct, you are still risking triggering a war that will kill billions. The Velcrins will not tolerate an unknown species establishing presence in the buffer zone. Perhaps Dayon agreed, but Earth's government has determined that the trade routes through the contested zone are worth the risk. We have mapped 7 different paths that would cut our travel time to other regions of the galaxy by 40%. That represents an enormous economic opportunity for our species. You are willing to die for economics? The Paxian representative pulsed in horror. We are willing to defend our interests, Daeyun corrected. There is a difference. Earth is not looking for a fight, but we did not come to space to hide in our home system waiting for permission to explore. The council chamber erupted again, with multiple representatives shouting over each other. Some demanded that the council take action to forcibly remove the human vessels. Others argued that any military action near the Velkrans might trigger the very war they were trying to avoid. A few representatives remained silent, studying Daeyun, with calculating expressions that suggested they were reassessing their understanding of humanity. Taemin banged his gavel. A tool adopted from human customs that had proven useful for maintaining order. Ambassador, you must understand that the Velkrans will not negotiate. They will simply attack your fleet. Your ships are small, and your species is young. You cannot possibly stand against a Velkran battle group. Then we will find out soon enough, Daeyon said calmly. Our fleet has orders to establish a waypoint station in the center of the neutral zone. If the Velkrans want to talk about it, we are happy to talk. If they want to fight about it, we will defend ourselves. This is insane, Taemin said, and several council members echoed his sentiment. You are gambling with the lives of your crew and possibly starting a galactic war, Representative Taemin. With respect, you do not understand humans very well yet, Daeyon said. We did not become a spacefaring species by being cautious. We did not build our civilization by backing down when someone told us an area was too dangerous. If we had listened to every warning about risks, we would still be hiding in caves on our home continent. Before Taemin could respond, an alert flashed across the chamber's displays. A Velkran battle group had been detected moving toward the human fleet's position. 10 massive dreadnoughts, each one larger than 3 human ships combined, were on an intercept course. The Council's military analysts estimated contact would occur within the next hour. The chamber went absolutely silent as everyone stared at the display. This was it. 300 years of careful diplomacy and cautious military positioning was about to end because one species was too stubborn or too stupid to understand galactic politics. Ambassador, you need to order your fleet to withdraw immediately, Taemin said urgently. Those dreadnoughts will annihilate your ships. Please, I am begging you, save your people. Daeyon looked at the display for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was still calm, but there was something hard underneath it now. I cannot give that order, Representative. Our fleet commander has authority to make decisions in the field. She will respond to the Velkrans according to her best judgment. She? Taemin asked, confused. Admiral Juan, Daeyun said. She has 40 years of experience in Earth's naval forces. If anyone can navigate this situation, it is her. The council members looked at each other with expressions of pity and horror. 40 years seemed like a long time to humans, but it was barely a moment in galactic terms. This Admiral Juan would be facing Velkran, war masters, who had been training for warfare since before Earth had discovered electricity. Then we can only watch, the Paxian representative said quietly, and prepare to rescue whatever survivors remain after the Velkrans finish their attack. Daeyon said nothing. He simply stood in the center of the council chamber, hands still clasped behind his back, watching the display as the Velkran battle group grew closer to the human fleet. His face showed no fear, no doubt, no concern at all. Taemin found that more disturbing than anything else that had happened. Either this human was in complete denial about what was about to happen, or humans knew something about warfare that the rest of the galaxy had somehow missed. Within the hour, they would all find out which it was. The council initiated a live feed from the monitoring station nearest to the engagement zone. Every representative in the chamber watched in silence as the 10 Velkran dreadnoughts surrounded the 30 human ships. The formation was textbook intimidation, designed to make any opponent realize they were completely outmatched. Taem Hain hoped desperately that Admiral Giwan would see reason and order a retreat. Surely when faced with such overwhelming force, even stubborn humans would recognize when they were beaten. But as the Velcrin War Master opened communications to demand the humans surrender, Temin saw something in Ambassador Dayan's eyes that made his blood run cold. The human was smiling. War Master. Kalen had been commanding Velcrin warships for over a century, and in that time he had crushed 17 rebellions, conquered 6 independent colonies, and sent countless enemies fleeing before the might of the Empire. His flagship, the Crushing Fist, was one of the largest vessels in the Velcron Armada. Bristling with weapons that could crack a planet's crust, he had never encountered an enemy that did not either surrender immediately or die quickly. The human ships floating before him looked like toys. Kalen's tactical display showed 30 small vessels arranged in a loose formation around what appeared to be construction equipment. They were building something which was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. The ships themselves were angular and ugly, with none of the elegant curves that proper warships possessed. Their weapons were visible, but primitive-looking, like something a species might build in their first 100 years of space travel. Open communications, Kalen ordered his crew. The transmission connected immediately, and a human face appeared on his screen. It was a female by their species standards, with short dark hair and eyes that studied him with unsettling directness. She wore a military uniform that looked practical but unimpressive. "I am War Master Kalen of the Velcrin Empire," he announced in Galactic Standard, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been questioned. "You are in violation of the Neutral Zone Agreement. You have one opportunity to leave this area immediately, or you will be destroyed." The human did not look afraid. That was unusual, but not unprecedented. Some species had warriors brave enough to face death without showing fear. What was unusual was that she looked almost bored by his threat. "I am Admiral Giwan of the Earth Defense Force," she replied, her accent making the Galactic Standard words sound harsh and clipped. "We are establishing a waypoint station for trade routes. We have no quarrel with the Velcrin Empire. Please move your ships aside so we can continue our work." Kalen felt his crest bristle with anger. Move aside. This primitive creature was telling him to move aside. His crew members exchanged glances of disbelief around the command deck. None of them had ever heard anyone speak to a War Master with such casual disrespect. "You do not give orders to the Velcrin Empire," Kalen said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "You are a minor species that has barely left your home system. We have been traveling the stars since before your ancestors learned to walk upright. You will withdraw, or you will die." Admiral Guwan tilted her head slightly, and Kalen had the disturbing impression that she was analyzing him the way a predator might analyze prey. "War Master Kalen, Earth did not send us here to fight. But we will not run away because you threatened us. If you fire on my ships, you will discover why humanity does not back down from bullies." "Bullies?" Kalen repeated the word, uncertain of its exact translation. "You dare to insult the Velcrin Empire?" "I am stating facts," Juwan said simply. "You have been posturing with the Galactic Council for 300 years without actually fighting. You threaten species weaker than yourself but never follow through because you are worried about the cost. That is the definition of a bully in human terms." Kalen's hands tightened on his command console. No one had spoken to him like this in decades. The fact that it was coming from some upstart species that had achieved space travel less than a decade ago made it even more intolerable. He looked at his tactical officer, who nodded to confirm that all weapon systems were ready. "I will give you one final chance," Kalen said slowly, emphasizing each word. "Leave now, or face annihilation." "We will not leave," Admiral Guan replied, and there was steel in her voice now. "Fire if you must. But understand that if you fire first, the Velcrin Empire will be starting a war with humanity, and you have no idea what that means." Kalen cut the communication with an angry gesture. His crew looked to him for orders, and he could see the anticipation in their eyes. They wanted to see these arrogant humans obliterated. They wanted to send a message to the entire galaxy about what happened to species who disrespected the Velcrin Empire. "Target the lead human vessel," Kalen commanded. "Fire a warning shot across their bow. Let them see what our weapons can do." The Crushing Fist's main cannon charged with a sound that vibrated through the deck plating. Energy gathered in the weapon's focusing array, enough power to vaporize a small moon. The shots streaked across space, passing within 100 meters of the human flagship. The energy discharge lit up nearby space with brilliant purple light. It should have been terrifying. It should have sent the humans scrambling to retreat. Instead, what happened next would be analyzed by military strategists. Across the galaxy for centuries, the human fleet exploded into action. Missile pods that Kalen had thought were simple hull plating suddenly opened and released hundreds of small projectiles. They streaked toward his battle group with acceleration that should not have been possible for their size. At the same time, the human ships rotated in perfect unison, bringing weapons to bear that had been hidden along their hulls. Evasive action. Kalen shouted, but it was already too late. The missiles hit his shields first, and instead of exploding externally as expected, they burrowed through the energy barriers like they were not even there. Some kind of shield penetration technology that the Velkrans had never encountered before. The missiles detonated directly against his ship's armor, and the explosions were far more powerful than anything that size should produce. Then the railguns opened. Fire. Kalen watched in horror as solid projectiles, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, tore through his fleet. They moved too fast for point defense systems to track effectively. Each impact sent showers of molten metal and debris into space. His tactical display lit up with damage reports from every ship in the battle group. "Return fire," Kalen ordered desperately. "All ships, weapons free." His fleet responded with everything they had. Energy beams that could slice through asteroids, plasma cannons that burned at stellar temperatures, kinetic weapons that could shatter space stations. The Velkran armada unleashed enough firepower to devastate a small planet, and the human ships danced through it. They moved with a coordination that seemed impossible. When one ship drew fire, others would adjust their positions to provide covering fire or create crossfire opportunities. They were not just reacting to Velkran attacks, they were anticipating them. It was like fighting an opponent who could read your mind. How are they doing this? Kalen's tactical officer shouted over the alarm klaxons. Their computers should not be fast enough to calculate these maneuvers. But it was not just computers, Kalen realized with growing horror. It was experience. These humans moved like they had been fighting battles like this for their entire lives. Every formation, every tactical decision, every maneuver was executed with the precision of a species that had perfected the art of warfare. The crushing. Fist shuddered as another human missile barrage hit the ship. Kalen gripped his console as sparks rained from damaged systems overhead. His tactical display showed 3 dreadnoughts completely disabled, their engines offline and weapons destroyed. 2 more were burning, their crews struggling to contain internal fires. His own shields were down to 20% and dropping fast. "War Master, we have to retreat," his second-in-command said urgently. "We cannot win this engagement." Kalen wanted to refuse. He wanted to order his ships to fight to the last, rather than accept defeat from a species he had dismissed as primitive. But he had not survived a century of combat by being stupid. This was not a battle he could win, and throwing away ships out of pride would not change that. "All ships, fall back to the Empire border," Kalen ordered, and the words tasted like ash in his mouth. Maximum speed. The Velkran battle group turned and fled, leaving debris and disabled ships floating in space. The human fleet did not pursue. They simply returned to their construction site and continued assembling their waypoint station as if nothing had happened. Kalen's communication console chimed with an incoming message. Against his better judgment, he accepted it. Admiral Giwan's face appeared on his screen again, and she still did not look afraid. She looked disappointed. "War Master Kalen, Earth remains open to peaceful trade and dialogue with the Velkran Empire," she said formally. "We have no desire for further conflict. But we will not be intimidated or pushed around. We hope you will choose peace." Kalen cut the communication without responding. Around his damaged command deck, his crew worked frantically to keep critical systems operational. They did not look at him, which was probably wise. No War Master wanted to see the expressions on his crew's faces after suffering such a humiliating defeat. The battle had lasted exactly 17 minutes. The Velcrin Empire had lost 4 dreadnoughts completely destroyed and 6 more heavily damaged. Hundreds of crew members were dead or injured. The humans had suffered minor damage to 3 vessels with no reported casualties. As the crushing fist limped back toward Empire space, Kalen composed his report to the High Command. He knew they would not believe him at first. He barely believed it himself. A species that had been in space for less than a decade had just defeated one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy in a straight fight. The Galactic Council had been right to warn the humans away from the contested zone, but not for the reason they thought. The danger was not to humanity. The danger was to everyone else. Kalen looked at his tactical display one final time, studying the recordings of the human ships in combat. Their movements, their tactics, their absolute refusal to back down even when outnumbered and outgunned. He had fought many species in his century of service to the Empire. He had faced warriors who were brave, strategists who were clever, and fleets that were powerful. But he had never faced anyone quite like humans. News of the engagement spread through FTL communication networks within hours. Every species with access to military intelligence received the same basic facts. 30 human ships had defeated 10 Velcrin dreadnoughts in less than 20 minutes. The recordings were shared, analyzed, and debated by strategists across the galaxy. In the Galactic Council chamber, Temin watched the battle footage for the 5th time, and each viewing left him more disturbed than the last. He had warned Earth about the danger they faced. He had tried to save them from themselves. And instead, they had revealed that perhaps the galaxy needed to be warned about humanity. Ambassador Dayon still stood in the center of the chamber, watching the same footage with a slight smile. When he noticed Temin looking at him, the smile widened. "I told you," Dayon said quietly. "You do not understand humans very well yet." Emergency Tribunal convened 24 hours after the engagement, and the atmosphere in the council chamber was completely different from before. Where there had been dismissive curiosity about humanity, now there was barely concealed fear. Representatives whispered to each other behind their translation fields, and every eye in the room kept drifting to Ambassador Dayon, who stood calmly in the center of the chamber as if he had not just watched his species humiliate one of the galaxy's most feared military powers. Temin called the session to order, though his hand shook slightly as he activated the tribunal protocols. Beside the human ambassador stood a Velcrin representative named Torin, whose scarred face and military bearing suggested he had seen many battles. The two of them could not have looked more different. Dayon appeared relaxed and almost friendly, while Torin radiated barely controlled anger. "This tribunal has been called to address the incident in the contested zone," Temin began, reading from the formal protocol. Despite knowing everyone in the chamber had already seen the battle recordings a dozen times, Ambassador Dayon, the Galactic Council demands an explanation. Your species has been warned about the delicate balance of power in this region. You were told that entering the contested zone could trigger a war, and yet you not only entered the zone, but engaged in military action that has destabilized 3 centuries of careful diplomacy. Dayon nodded respectfully. Representative Temin, Earth appreciates the Council's concern. However, we must clarify several points. First, we did not seek military confrontation. We were establishing a waypoint station for trade purposes. Second, the Velcrin Empire fired the first shot. We simply defended ourselves. And third, we are still willing to establish peaceful relations with all galactic powers, including the Velcrins. Torin interjected, his voice harsh with suppressed fury. You destroyed 4 dreadnoughts and crippled 6 more. That is not defense. That is aggression. With respect, Ambassador Torin, we used exactly as much force as necessary to stop the attack, Dayon replied calmly. We could have pursued your retreating vessels and caused much more damage. We chose not to. That demonstrates restraint, not aggression. The council chamber erupted with multiple representatives trying to speak at once. The Vrax collective's clicking became so rapid their translator gave up and displayed error messages. The Paxian representative pulsed with agitation that made their entire body flicker like a malfunctioning light. Even the normally stoic Lorians were gesturing emphatically at each other. Temin banged his gavel repeatedly until order was restored. Ambassador Dayon, the Council needs to understand how this is possible. Your species achieved faster-than-light travel only 8 years ago. Your technology should be centuries behind ours. And yet you defeated a Velcrin battle group with apparent ease. How? For the first time since entering the chamber, Dayon's friendly demeanor faded slightly. His expression became more serious, almost sad. Representative Taman, may I ask you a question? How long has it been since the Lorian Commonwealth fought a major war? Taman blinked, confused by the question. We have been at peace internally for over 1,000 years. There are occasional border conflicts, but nothing that would qualify as a major war in the Vrax Collective. The insectoid representative clicked thoughtfully. We achieved species unity approximately 800 years ago. Since then, we have focused on exploration and scientific advancement. Dayon looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of various representatives. The Paxians, the Korathi, the Helvians. When did your species last experience a full-scale war among your own kind? One by one, the representatives answered, and the pattern became clear. Every species in the Galactic Council had achieved internal peace centuries or even millennia ago. They had turned their attention to the stars only after resolving their conflicts at home. War was something in their distant past, a phase of development they had moved beyond. Humanity achieved faster-than-light travel 8 years ago, Dayon said quietly, but we have been at war with each other for our entire recorded history. When you were developing philosophy and art, we were perfecting tactics and strategy. When you were building universities, we were building military academies. Every human child grows up learning about battles that shaped our world. We know war intimately because we have never stopped practicing it. The chamber fell silent as the implications of Dayon's words sank in. Taman felt something cold settle in his chest. The Council had always assumed that military capability would correlate with technological advancement. But what if the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy were not the ones with the best weapons, but the ones with the most experience using them? So you are saying that humanity is simply better at warfare than the rest of us? A council member asked, unable to keep the disbelief from their voice. I am saying that warfare is not a technology problem, Dayon replied. It is an experience problem. The Velcrins have powerful ships and weapons, but they have been fighting the same kind of battles for centuries. They know how to intimidate and overwhelm enemies who fight like they do. But humans fight differently. We adapt constantly because we have had to. On Earth, if you do not adapt, you lose. And if you lose, you die. Torin, the Velcrin representative, spoke up with barely controlled rage. You speak as if you are superior to us. You are a young species that got lucky in one engagement. Lucky? Dayon turned to face the Velcrin directly. Ambassador Torin, with all due respect, it was not luck. Our fleet was outnumbered. Our ships were smaller. By every measure, we should have lost that engagement. But we won because our admiral has 40 years of experience studying and fighting battles. She has run simulations of tens of thousands of different combat scenarios. She knew exactly what the Velcrins would do because we have fought opponents who use similar tactics for centuries. This is impossible, Torin insisted. No species can be naturally superior at warfare. We are not naturally superior, Dayon said tiredly. We are practiced. There is a difference. I wish we were not so good at war. I wish humanity had achieved peace centuries ago, like the rest of you, but we did not. We brought our conflicts with us to the stars. And now that we are here, we will not be pushed around by anyone, not even the Velcrin Empire. Taman watched the exchange with growing concern. He could see the council fracturing before his eyes. Some representatives looked frightened of humanity's military capability. Others looked calculating, already considering what it might mean to have humans as allies rather than enemies. A few looked angry that their assumptions about the galaxy's power structure were being so thoroughly overturned. The council must decide how to respond to this situation, Taman said, trying to regain control of the tribunal. The balance of power that has maintained peace for 3 centuries has been disrupted. We need to understand what humanity wants. Earth wants what every species wants, Dayon said simply. We want to trade, to explore, to establish ourselves as a respected member of the galactic community. We do not want war with the Council or the Velcran Empire. But we will not be confined to our home system because you are afraid of changing the status quo. The status quo has prevented billions of deaths, Taman argued. You may be skilled at warfare, Ambassador, but you are naive about galactic politics. The moment we disrupted the balance between the Council and the Velcrans, we risked total war. Did we? Dayon asked, and there was something knowing in his voice that made Taman pause. Or did we reveal that the Emperor has no clothes? I do not understand that reference, Taman admitted. It is a human story about a leader who pretended to wear magnificent clothing that only the wise could see. In reality, he wore nothing at all. But everyone pretended they could see the clothes because they were afraid to admit the truth. It took a child to point out that the Emperor was naked. What is your point? Torin demanded. My point is that the war you have all been so afraid of may not be as inevitable as you think, Dayon said. The Council and the Velcrans have been locked in this stalemate for 300 years, not because either side is preparing for war, but because neither side wants to be the first to suggest peace. You are trapped by your own threats and counter-threats. Someone needs to break the cycle. Do you think humanity can do that? Temin asked skeptically. I think humanity can provide what neither of you can. A third option, Dayon replied. The Velcrans cannot back down from the Council without looking weak. The Council cannot compromise with the Velcrons without encouraging future aggression. But both of you can negotiate with Earth. We have no history with either side. We have proven we are not weak, and we have no interest in conquest or expansion beyond securing trade routes. The chamber went quiet as representatives considered this. Taman could see the wheels turning in dozens of alien minds. It was a bold proposal, possibly even a brilliant one. But it required trusting a species that had just demonstrated frightening military capability. Why should we trust you? Torin asked the question everyone was thinking. You defeated our battle group easily. What is to stop you from conquering the galaxy yourself? Dayon smiled sadly. Because we have learned from experience that conquest is expensive, difficult, and ultimately unsatisfying. Every empire on Earth that tried to dominate by force eventually collapsed. We do not want to repeat those mistakes on a galactic scale. We just want to be left alone to trade and explore. If we refuse your offer, a council member asked, then we will establish our waypoint station anyway. And you can continue your 300-year stalemate, Dayon said with a shrug. But I think both the Council and the Velcrans are tired of wasting resources on a cold war that benefits no one. I think you want an excuse to end it. So let me make you an offer. Let Earth mediate peace negotiations between the Council and the Velcran Empire. If we succeed, everyone benefits. If we fail, you are no worse off than you are now. Temin looked at his fellow council members. He could see the same mix of fear, hope, and calculation on every face. This human proposal could either usher in a new era of peace or completely destabilize the galaxy. But doing nothing was no longer an option either, not now that humanity had proven they would not be ignored. The Council will need time to discuss this proposal, Taman said finally, and I suspect the Velcran High Command will as well. We will reconvene in 3 days with our decisions, as the tribunal adjourned. Taman watched Dayon leave the chamber with the same calm confidence he had displayed throughout the entire proceeding. The human seemed completely unbothered by the fact that he had just proposed mediating a 300-year-old conflict that had stumped the galaxy's best diplomats. Either humans were incredibly arrogant, Taman thought, or they really did understand something about conflict resolution that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Within 3 days, they would find out which it was. The negotiations began on a neutral station that humanity had constructed specifically for this purpose. It floated in the center of what had been the contested zone, equidistant from both Council and Velcran territories. The station was built in a style that borrowed elements from a dozen different species architecture. A deliberate statement that this was a place where everyone was equal. Sujin had been chosen as Earth's chief mediator, and as she prepared for the first day of negotiations, she felt the weight of what was being attempted. She was not naive. She knew that 300 years of hostility could not be erased in a few weeks. But she also knew that sometimes the hardest part of ending a conflict was simply getting both sides to sit in the same room. The conference chamber was circular, with no head of the table to suggest that any party was more important than another. Representatives from the Galactic Council sat on one side, their varied physiologies accommodated by customized seating and atmospheric controls. On the other side sat the Velcrin delegation, led by a high commander named Vexen, whose reputation for ruthlessness was known throughout the Empire. And between them, at a small table that connected the two sides, sat Sujin and her small team of human advisors. "Thank you all for coming." Sujin began, speaking in Galactic Standard with only a slight accent. "Earth appreciates that this is a difficult step for everyone involved. We are not here to judge the past or assign blame. We are here to explore whether there is a path forward that serves everyone's interests better than the current situation. The current situation serves the Velcrin Empire perfectly well," High Commander Vexen said coldly. His voice carried the confidence of someone who had never doubted his position. "We have no need for peace negotiations. We agreed to these talks only because the High Command was curious about human audacity." Taman, leading the council delegation, bristled at Vexen's words. "The Empire has been expanding aggressively for centuries. This peace you speak of is simply a pause before your next conquest. And the Council has been building military installations along our borders while crying about how peaceful they are," Vexen countered. "You speak of diplomacy while preparing for war?" Sujin held up her hand before the argument could escalate. "High Commander, Representative Taman, before we discuss what either side has done, let me ask you both a question. What do you want?" "Excuse me?" Vexen asked, clearly not expecting such a direct question. "What does the Velcrin Empire want from this region of space?" Sujin asked plainly. "Not what you want from the Council, not what you want to prevent, but what is your actual goal?" Vexen was silent for a moment, clearly considering whether this was some kind of trap. Finally, he answered. "The Empire wants resources and trade routes. We have a large population that requires support. Expansion has always been about securing what our people need. And the Council." Sujin turned to Taman. "We want security for our member species," Taman replied. "We want to ensure that no aggressive power can threaten our colonies or trade. We want stable borders. So the Empire wants economic growth, and the Council wants security," Sujin summarized. "Those are not inherently contradictory goals. You have been treating them as if they are, but they are not. The Empire's growth comes at the expense of independent colonies," a council member interjected. "They conquer rather than trade. We conquer because no one will trade with us fairly," a Velcrin ambassador argued back. "The Council has pressured other species to refuse our merchants access to their markets. We are forced to take what we need." Sujin listened to both sides with the patient expression of someone who had heard similar arguments many times before. In a way, she had. Earth's history was full of conflicts that looked intractable from the inside, but had clear solutions once you stepped back and examined the actual interests involved. "Let me propose something," Sujin said, pulling up a holographic star map. "The contested zone between your territories is approximately 12 light-years across and contains 17 systems with significant resources. For 300 years, neither side has been able to exploit these resources because you are both too afraid the other will use them militarily. Correct?" Both sides nodded reluctantly. "So you have a region of space full of resources that no one can use. Borders that both sides spend enormous amounts maintaining. And a Cold War that drains your economies and prevents both sides from pursuing other opportunities." Sujin highlighted various areas on the map. "What if instead of dividing this territory you shared it? Share with the Velcrins." Timon sounded horrified. "They would use any shared resources to build weapons against us. The Council would do the same," Vexen added. "Trust is not possible between our peoples." "I am not asking you to trust each other," Sujin said calmly. "I am asking you to trust the structure we create. Earth proposes establishing the contested zone as a jointly administered trade corridor. Both the Council and the Empire would have equal access to resources and trade routes. But neither would have military control." "Who would have military control?" Vexen asked suspiciously. Earth would guarantee the security of the trade corridor, Sujin said. Our fleet would patrol the zone and ensure that neither side violates the agreement. We have no territorial interests in this region, and we have proven we are capable of defending the territory if necessary. The room erupted in objections from both sides. Council members worried about giving humans too much power. Velcrin representatives refused to accept human oversight of their trade. But underneath the protests, Sujin could hear something else. Consideration. Both sides were actually thinking about the proposal instead of dismissing it outright. This is unprecedented, Taman said once the chamber had quieted down. No species has ever served as neutral guarantor of a major treaty like this. Everything about humanity's entrance into galactic politics has been unprecedented, Sujin replied with a slight smile. Why stop now? Over the next 6 weeks, the negotiations continued with an intensity that surprised everyone involved. Sujin proved to be a skilled mediator, knowing when to push both sides and when to let them work through issues themselves. She had a talent for reframing conflicts in ways that made solutions obvious without making either side feel like they had lost, while the diplomatic talks progressed. Admiral Jiwan conducted joint military exercises with both Council and Velcrin forces. The exercises were carefully designed to demonstrate human tactical kappa,